As a result of the explorations and studies I've undertaken, I've had the good fortune to encounter and learn from a number of different alchemical traditions. Though I'm not really a fan of mixing practices, something I'm against, it can be useful to see what parallel traditions to your own teach in order to see where similarities and differences lie. The Neidan school that I primarily practice within is the Longmen or Dragon Gate tradition, and I've had two main teachers within this line. On top of this, I've studied the Nei Gong practices originating from within China, as well as their cousin lineages from Southeast Asia. These are versions of Nei Gong which have definitely taken on their own flavour due to the influence of the native esoteric beliefs in the region. Despite these changes, you can still feel the Chinese roots of these arts underpinning how they work. Through a great deal of necessary compartmentalization, I've been focusing on my main alchemical practice, but have benefited from gaining a deeper understanding of how the other branches of practice work as well. Whilst they do indeed have distinct differences in how they function, differences that even sometimes feel like they directly clash with one another, they do also have some commonalities with regard to how they approach certain topics. One area of agreement is around the subject of refinement of Jing or essence and Qi, and this is what I would like to explore when I talk about this now. Everybody who encounters Chinese internal practice of any sort will no doubt be familiar with the basics of Jing and Qi and what they are. Jing is commonly translated as the body's essence, and it is viewed as a somewhat finite energetic substance that gradually depletes over the course of our lives until we age and then ultimately pass away. Qi is translated as energy quite often, and a large degree of internal study within arts such as Nei Gong is concerned with the cultivation of and development of this enigmatic substance. Though these are indeed solid starting points with regards to our understanding, it's okay to use these terms, we can take these ideas further. And so let's look at each of these two in turn from the point of view of Chinese alchemical training. Let's start with Jing. Consider the foundation of our constitutional level, the dictator of our innate health, and the treasured substance which Taoists would seek to retain in order to achieve heights of great longevity. Jing is an aspect of the subtle level of our being that all internal practitioners concern themselves with in one way or another. If a practitioner can learn how to consolidate and work with the Jing effectively, then a solid foundation for health and powerful inner development can be built. In contrast to this, if a person wastes the potential of their Jing through uncontrolled living, free from any ideas of moderation, then the oil in the lamp will burn up fast, and so they can expect poor health, exhaustion, and rapid rates of aging. All of this is pretty standard knowledge for anybody who's studied either Chinese medicine or the internal arts such as Qigong for any length of time. But what is not so well known in my experience is that Jing is actually viewed to be made up of three key parts within most Nei Gong traditions that I've encountered. Sometimes these three parts of Jing are labelled clearly, and other times they're merely suggested or hinted at. First we have Jing's yin aspect. So this first aspect of Jing would be that part of the essence that goes on to form physical matter. So from the seat of the Jing comes the potential of all physical production within the body, from bone marrow and blood to fluids, and even all the way down to cellular reproduction. This yin aspect of Jing gives us the birth of the body and the physical manifestation of the growth, developmental and aging processes. This is supported by the external essence, for want of a better term, from that which we eat and drink each day. This aspect of the Jing is inevitably used up on a second-by-second basis as our body reproduces itself. According to how alchemical teachings approach the sustaining of this aspect of Jing, it is to do with our general physical health. Of course, our physical health and our psychological health are intimately entwined, but to keep it simple, how we take care of our physical health will, to some extent, slow down the burning up of the yin aspect of the Jing. Now let's look at the yang aspect of the Jing. This second aspect of the Jing would be the life force that is contained within the essence. It is like a spark of potential energy contained within the substance of the yin Jing. Some traditions would call this chun yang, or pure yang, while other traditions have labeled it as Jing Hua, meaning the essence or the highest aspect of the Jing. You'll also see metallurgical symbology used to discuss the relationship between these two parts of Jing, and this spark is seen as the seed of the congenital essence, a highly valued treasure to be built up by alchemical practitioners. It's beyond the scope of this short video to go into detail concerning all of the symbology around the different components of Jing, and so instead we shall focus on some things that are practical around this subject. To the Taoists, this life force contained within the seat of the yin aspect of Jing was what was sought in their practice. The yin aspect of Jing could be supported through food and drink, but the yang aspect was a far more elusive aspect of Jing since it originated from within us and was irreplaceable once lost. Nowhere is it easier to understand the yin and yang nature of Jing than in our sexual fluids. In the case of males, the fluid of the sperm was seen as the yin aspect of the Jing, whilst the potential for life contained within that sperm was the yang aspect of Jing. In the case of women, the sexual fluids would similarly be the yin aspect of the Jing, while the yang aspect would be present within their ova. In many Taoist schools, there was a focus on either restricting sexual activity or ejaculation for males so as not to leak excessive amounts of Jing. In other schools, sexual activity was said to be less of an issue if the male could learn to withhold his ejaculation upon orgasm, and these are very prevalent practices in contemporary times, in contemporary Qigong schools for sure. Whilst it is true that doing this would really prevent the loss of the Jing through sexual activity, neither of these two methods seem to be advised by the majority of alchemical and Nei Gong schools, certainly not the ones I've encountered. These schools perhaps advise moderation of sexual activity for sustaining a degree of health, especially if people overuse their Jing in this manner, but actually the greater skill was in learning to extract the yang aspect of the Jing from the yin. So, through controlled and very specific practice, the yang spark of Jing is extracted from the Jing, and then the yin aspect of Jing, the fluid, void of potential for life, is then free to be expelled from the body. Though the yin aspect of Jing is still a slight draw upon our essence, it can be supported in its replenishment through food, rest and time. This does not apply to the yang aspect of Jing that is extremely limited in its quantity. Once extracted, the yang aspect of the Jing, an aspect of Jing which is purely energetic in nature, may then be circulated through the body via the channels, nerves and even hormonal system in order to replenish the system. The idea is that each spark of yang Jing had enough potential energy to go on to create a new life, and so if a practitioner is able to circulate this aspect of their Jing through the body, they would harness this energy for health, rejuvenation and longevity. I don't share this with you to extol the benefits of one practice over another or really one approach to Jing over another, but really just to help illustrate how the different aspects of Jing, its yin and yang components, are viewed in the alchemical traditions. Traditional ways of discussing this are often around pure yang circulating around the 8 extraordinary channels of the body, or similar concepts like this, but in my experience, the practitioners higher up the ladders of lineage, especially those in the Southeast Asian lines, have moved away from these older models, these older conceptual ideas, in favour of more body experience-based explanations. It does not mean that the older concept is incorrect, perhaps just that more detailed analysis and explanation is now available. I have no opinion either way on older versus more contemporary explanations. I'm simply happy if a teacher can explain, teach, and then demonstrate the outcomes of whatever they're passing on, because unfortunately that's becoming rarer and rarer all of the time. As a side note, I'm aware that the labelling of Jin here into yin and yang aspects will cause confusion for those who study Chinese medicine, who may be used to understanding Jing in a different way. I had this issue first as well, but I essentially had to remind myself that whilst there are crossovers, alchemical theory and medical theory are two distinct entities in their own right. So now that we've looked at the yin and the yang aspect of Jing, how about we look at Jing's mental aspect? I've only met one teacher who really discusses the mental aspect of Jing in a clearly defined manner, whilst other teachers I've met will hint at it or perhaps discuss in a vaguer fashion what the psychological issues around essence are. Essentially, as I see it, the Jing is stirred into action by our desires, especially those that are more animalistic or reactive in nature. On top of this, the emotion of fear and our insecurities have a detrimental effect upon the Jing as well. It is not classical, but I think of our Jing as being either in motion or moving towards stillness. When in motion, the Jing is being burnt up more quickly, and when moving towards stillness, it is gathering and there for us to access through our internal training. One classical word for refined in the Jing in Nei Gong text is to consolidate the Jing, and this would seem to fit with how I describe it above. Certainly when working with the Jing, it clearly feels as if this gathering or consolidating movement takes place around the region of the perineum when we take care of the mental aspect of the Jing. When the Jing is consolidated, the yang aspect being extracted through practice, and when the Jing is in motion or dispersed, it's almost impossible to grasp that spark of yang with any technique at all. It doesn't matter how skilled we are. That Jing needs to grow still. Then we can extract that spark of yang. This means that as practitioners of the internal arts, we must learn how to regulate and master the mental, emotional, psychological aspect of whatever part of our being we're working with, as well as simply carrying out the mechanical technique. We can have the best and most effective, top-secret alchemical method for Jing extraction known to mankind, and it will still be to no avail if our mind is all over the place and we're not looking to balance the mental element of our cultivation. Some people I have met mistakenly, in my humble opinion, made an error here and through their desires, and thought that their desires, especially their sexual desires, can help to stimulate the Jing in a way that is beneficial for their alchemy practice. I really see this as an error, and I believe this error has arisen due to the fact that sexual desire can feel powerful, but in this case our feeling is in error, as actually the Jing needs to be stilled and consolidated in order for us to work with it, not ramped up and excited. It's pretty much a rule within Taoism that the potential for great change and evolution arises from the center of stillness, not desire-fueled activity. All internal practice, such as Nei Dan or Nei Gong, is really a coming together of both physiological training methods and the mental training, the correct mental qualities needed for our work to bear fruit. One teacher explained this to me very succinctly. The method or practice we have at any given time is the cause, and the result of this practice is the effect. In order for the cause to lead to the effect, the conditions must also be correct, and the majority of cases this condition is our mental state. We are literally the deciding factor, or our psychological state is the deciding factor between whether our practice will be successful or not. Now let's look at Qi. Qi is the second of our two components, and it's usually translated as energy. Qi is one of the more controversial aspects of the Chinese arts due to the many ways in which the term can actually be translated. This is especially true in the West, where our way of thinking tends to prefer a clearly defined meaning behind a term that is both concrete and irrefutably true. In my experience, the traditional Eastern way of approaching a term such as Qi is a little bit more flexible, with there being no problem with having both literal and conceptual understandings of the term being held at the same time. Indeed, sometimes even contradictory definitions of the term Qi can be held by the same teacher, within the same tradition, and even sometimes within the same practice, and this is still not seen as an issue by those in the East. Though this may sound strange to many people reading this, I made peace with this idea by simply seeing that the term Qi could change in meaning according to how it was used. Essentially, it is one of the most contextual words we can use. For now, I shall focus on the term Qi as it's understood with alchemical and Nei Gong traditions. At least as far as my understanding allows me at this time, I shall look at the key ways in which Qi cultivation takes place and how this is relevant to our practice. I will, as seems fitting, divide the category of Qi up once again to three broad categories and explain each of these in turn. So first is the Qi of medicine. Let us look at the concept of Qi in the way that it's discussed within Chinese medicine. This is because the earlier stages of Nei Gong and alchemy cross over with medical theory with regards to how they wish to generate and cultivate Qi. Within Chinese medical theory, we can further divide Qi up into three more types: the Qi of the channels, the Qi of the body, and the Qi of functional activities of the body. Though it is possible to add further categories of Qi to this list, these are, to me, the key ways in which I personally look at Qi when looking through my medical practitioner lens, shall we say. So first, let's look at the Qi of the channels. There are many books and diagrams outlining the flow and function of Qi within the channels of the body. These pathways are sometimes known as meridians, or in Chinese, the Jing law of the body. Nei Gong and alchemy tend to focus on 14 of the main 72 channels of the body, which are a part of Chinese medicine. And, much like in medicine, the flow of qi within these pathways is concerned with both the energy that flows along their length as well as the blood, which is depicted as flowing alongside this qi. The same qi that an acupuncturist or body worker may access via various points along the channel's length must be maximized and made to flow smoothly and healthily through the body. In the earliest stages of internal practice, this is largely accomplished through breath work, mental cultivation, and qigong exercises, both static and dynamic versions of qigong. I will discuss this type of qi only briefly, simply because there's a lot of writing out there, a lot of teachings on this topic already in the public arena, and I also assume that most people listening to this will already have a fairly good background in this level of the qi. So let's move on to the qi of the body. The qi of the body really focuses upon the various types of transformative energy that exist within the region of the body encompassed with the body's three main jiao, or burners. As we consume food, breathe the air, and draw upon the reserves of the essence, the body goes through constant transformative process to produce functional energy which may be utilized on a daily basis. Chinese medicine has a detailed and systematic model for how the body produces this qi, which then enters the channel in order to be distributed to our organs and tissues. The efficiency of this process depends upon the functional health of our organs, and so this is where many Chinese doctors will focus their attention. The better we can metabolize this qi from various sources, the better our bodies will function, and so the healthier we will be. So this second form of qi is really concerning the efficiency of the body's functioning. Our third form of qi, with regards to the qi of Chinese medicine, is the qi of functional activities. The final main use of the term qi can be understood as the functional activity of an organ, and so it's really a qualitative rather than a quantitative term. For example, we may talk of the kidneys qi and the lungs qi on one level, and here we may be literally discussing the energy that is transformed, generated, or mobilized by this organ. This would be largely quantitative. But on another level, the level that I'm looking at now, we may be using the term to refer to the functional activity of the organ itself. So, qualitative, not quantitative. If we were to say that somebody is kidney qi deficient, for example, we're often, but not always, but often actually saying that the kidneys are not carrying out their functional role as well as they should. There may be various reasons for why this is the case, and this is where a skilled diagnosis may come in, but ultimately what we are discussing is how healthily an organ is carrying out its role. So, in conclusion, I've highlighted these three main categories of medical qi, shall we say, so as to show just how the term can be applied in different ways, even within the same study. The qi of the channels, the qi of the body, and the qi of the functional activities of the organs. All of these are different things, but fall under the heading of qi. Now, in the beginning stages of art, such as alchemy or Nei Gong, we're actually focused on increasing the health and amount of qi in the same way that we understand the term according to Chinese medicine. This is because the foundations of internal cultivation, according to the Taoist process, is based in increasing a person's well-being and health. My teacher always highlights to me that whilst improving your own health is not necessarily spiritual cultivation in the most literal sense of the term, health is always a foundation for spiritual growth. And without vibrant health, the cultivation of alchemical transformation will always be stunted. Let us move on to the second form of qi, which is the yin-yang qi. So now once we've moved beyond the Chinese medical definition of qi, we reach the category of yin and yang qi. Yes, I know. Everything is categorized according to yin and yang within these arts, and sometimes this in itself can be unhelpful. So in order to help, let us look at the yin and yang qi of internal practice in a more tangible or down-to-earth manner. So yang qi first. Yang qi is experienced as an electrical type energy that moves largely through the nervous system and in a linear fashion. It is the energy of life, warmth, and activity. It's the energy that may fry our nervous system, leading to burnout and adrenal fatigue if it's pushed too far, and the same energy that can leave us exhausted if we lack enough of it or it does not flow smoothly enough. When Qigong practitioners start to feel tingling along their channels or on the surface of their skin, or a feeling of an electrical current, or even start to discharge static energy from the body, this isn't that uncommon. This is the Yang Qi that is building and mobilizing. Here, at this stage of understanding Qi, we've departed from the standard medical way of looking at Qi, but yet at the same time, it's fairly easy to see parallels between the Qi of Nei Gong and Chinese medicine if you have a background in both arts. So how about Yin Qi? Well, Yin Qi is largely a magnetic feeling. It moves in fields and loops. It centers around poles and has a direct influence upon directing the flow of Yang Qi. In this manner, Yin Qi is in charge of forming the flow of Qi and directing it to various regions of the body. Whilst the electrical feeling Yang Qi moves through the body bringing life, the Yin Qi forms into spheres and orbits, exerting degrees of influence on Yang Qi's flow. Yang Qi will even bend and distort its path of flow according to how and where the Yin Qi fields are built. Nowhere is Yin and Yang Qi focused on so much as with the formation of the lower dantian, or elixir field, which is a major aspect of study with alchemy, Nei Gong and Qigong. Though definitions of the lower dantian and its functions may vary between practices, the foundation level of its development stay pretty much consistent across all of the deeper internal practices linked to Taoism and Nei Gong. These foundation stages of practice involve consolidating the container of the lower dantian so that the spherical organizing field of Yin Qi within the abdomen begins to gather and thicken. Many moving and static Qigong and Nei Gong practices work by connecting the actions of the palm to the Qi of the lower abdominal cavity so that smooth circular movements performed with the hands can assist with the drawing in of the lower dantian's outer shell. The Yin Qi in this region of the body pulls inwards, and so then there's now a powerful organizing and containing field established within the abdomen. The effects are extremely tangible as the form of Yin is found and the basis of the lower dantian cultivated. After the container is formed, the body's Yang Qi is maximized and directed downwards into the sphere of the dantian shell. This energy, which is very electrical in nature, fills the lower Yin field. And in this way, we store energy within the abdomen as if we're recharging a battery for usage later. Filling the dantian is a long and challenging process. It's slow work indeed. For a lengthy period of time, alchemical practice and Nei Gong is focused upon this task alongside whatever other qualities they may seek to help a practitioner develop. When I started out in Qigong practice, the lower dantian was discussed, and there was definitely an idea that all we had to do was draw Qi from outside or guide it to the lower abdomen and it would be stored easily in this place. After a number of years, trying out very diligently these methods, I've left with vague sensations of warmth and subtle movement in the abdomen, but little more. It would be several years later on in my training when I would meet teachers who could actually explain the process to me and show me that A, we don't start out with a dantian, rather than it being a natural entity, it is something that is establishing within the body, almost installing. And B, there must be a container built within this space of the lower abdomen before we can even think of containing anything within it. If there is no container, nothing can be stored. Qigong, Nei Gong and Nei Dan begin to diverge here with regards to how they approach further work with the lower dantian. Though these are only general rules and far from hard and fast distinctions, generally Qigong does the least work with the lower dantian, whilst Nei Gong and Nei Dan take it further. Qigong usually focuses on establishing a certain degree of Qi within the abdominal space and then uses this Qi for circulation and regulation of the channels of the body. This is pretty much how far it goes. Nei Gong takes this further and often seeks to compress these two forms of Qi together once the dantian is built. This is a stage of training surrounded by a lot of secrecy and, dare I say, myth. But essentially the Qi is pressurized through specific methods so as to work towards a skill commonly known as Yin Yang Gong in contemporary Nei Gong circles, though this term is mostly a modernism that is known in the West as it's hardly used within Asian Nei Gong schools as far as I've experienced. Nei Dan goes to the greatest extremes with regards to how far the dantian can be cultivated, as the spiritual medicine of the elixir itself is developed and stored within the dantian. Alchemical work with the dantian, out of all of them, is complex and intricate. Finally, we have the Qi of cultivation, so we say, cultivational Qi. It's a bit of an odd way to use the term, I know, but let's look at it. The category of qi starts to move beyond the literal and outwards into the conceptual at this stage. It's a form of qi that has the potential to connect a person to the deeper parts of spiritual cultivation, the realm of shen, and an energy which may flood the body, transforming it on a very deep level. When the qi of cultivation fills the body, a person almost glows with spiritual connection. This aspect of qi is difficult to discuss in great detail. It's very much an experiential or directly lived level of qi. It is beyond work with the channels, past the qi of the body. It's elevated beyond the stages of yin and yang qi, and yet at the same time, all of these stages are usually advised as being vitally important to set up the foundations before somebody moves into the higher cultivational levels of study. In my opinion, the qi we have previously discussed so far can be trained via various methods. We have practices for each of these, but the qi of cultivation arises when it's good and ready. There's nothing we can do about that. When the causes and the conditions are adequately in place, that is all. It is a rule of Taoism and internal practice in general that we should always focus on the causes and the conditions, which is our practice and our self, rather than chasing the effects. And this is a rule that is certainly applicable to the development of the qi of cultivation. So in conclusion, though this has been a brief chat, a brief introduction, and of course there are many omissions, such as the difficult subject of shen itself, but hopefully this has helped to give a brief overview of how I view Jing and Qi according to the teachings and methods of the Nei Dan and Nei Gong lines. The last thing I should really mention is the manner in which the substances of Jing and Qi interact. Avoiding the generally understood model of Jing being the root of Qi production via its conversion from one state to another, there is also another factor. There's the factor of how far we take our level of Qi, and how we can take this level of Qi beyond the potential we're generally capable of. If we were to look at the level of developing good health through internal practices, we could arguably say that we're all born with an innate potential with regards to our health, and how we then work with our body's Jing and Qi will dictate just how efficiently we manage our health within this capacity. So, maximizing our health means to maximize the level of Qi we can build within these personal parameters. Much of Qigong-based teachings, as well as Chinese medical guidance, points to the methods involved in achieving this. But what is often left out is the extraction of the yang spark from the body's essence. As we've already discussed, and how this influences the Qi, these are vital to understanding the deeper parts of alchemy. Essentially, that yang aspect of the Jing was there in your body to go on to provide the potential for a new human life. It is the part of you that was going to go on to create life. It is the energy of procreation. You were created from this original spark of yang, and in turn, you then have the potential to create life in the same manner. The alchemist or Nei Gong practitioner who knows how to settle the Jing to extract the yang spark and utilize it for their benefit understands how to draw it out from the Jing and send it through certain pathways of the body. These pathways, as we've already discussed, roughly correspond with the 8 extraordinary channels which are given such credence within Nei Dan theory. Particularly 3 or 4 of those channels, I would say, are of more importance than the others. As the energy of this pure yang travels through the body in this manner, it nourishes the body with the energy of creation itself. The body is taken back to a childlike state with regards to its energetic function, and so vast amounts of pure youthful energy is created. This amount of Qi, along with its quality, is above and beyond the innate potential level of Qi we could previously access, and so a practitioner is led to the deeper levels of development. This is in line with the state of converting the whole Tian or postnatal back to the Shan Tian or prenatal. It's considered a major attainment along the journey of cultivating and refining our Jing and Qi. In some traditions, they talk about this as finding the true water, and the true water is a very tricky thing to do within alchemical practice, but this is the process involved in it. So, there we have it. A brief exploration, fairly brief chat, of some of the concepts involved in cultivating Jing and Qi within alchemy and Nei Gong as I currently understand it. As ever, learning and knowledge is just a work in progress, and so, as such, I hope this isn't seen as the gospel truth, but rather as a place from which to consider and use as a catalyst for personal exploration of these ideas. Many blessings to all of you.